Congratulations. You did it. And now everything is bound to change. Somewhere in the last few weeks, maybe even yesterday, you made a quiet decision the universe wasn't expecting you to make yet. That one small internal shift sent out a signal that cannot be undone. You might not even realize how powerful that moment was, but it rerouted your path in a way that forces something to end. Something that was meant to drag on much longer. There's a version of reality you've been quietly walking away from, even if you never said it out loud. A world built on pretending to be okay, settling for half-truths, performing the life other people expected from you. You didn't confront it. You simply stopped feeding it. And the moment you did, something in that old world started losing its power over you. You may have noticed people acting strange around you lately. More attitude, more tension, more unprovoked disrespect. It's not random. It's a reaction to the energy you carry, the one most people can feel but can't explain. Spiritually attuned souls unintentionally expose what others try to hide. Your presence reveals their insecurities, their illusions, their unhealed parts. When people aren't ready for that, they project it onto you. They think you're judging them or pretending to be above them, when in reality, you're just living in alignment. The truth is they're uncomfortable because you make them confront themselves. That's why the attacks feel personal even when you've done nothing to start them. Light exposes what darkness tries to protect. Your calling, your purpose, your inner growth, all of it attracts resistance. If you felt targeted, misunderstood, or challenged for no rational reason, it's because you're significant. The enemy never wastes energy on someone who isn't a threat. You're rising into a version of yourself that can't be controlled the same way anymore. Everything trying to hold on to the old dynamic is reacting to that shift. The pressure is proof you're breaking through. Most people will wake up tomorrow and continue moving through life exactly the same. Still distracted, still guessing, still wrapped in fog they've grown comfortable inside. They won't notice anything has shifted because they didn't train their eyes to notice. But you did. While the world stayed entertained and overwhelmed, you were learning how to see in the dark. You were navigating uncertainty with intuition instead of panic. You were choosing clarity before clarity was available. That's why tomorrow hits differently for you. Clarity appears first to the ones who honored it in the dark. And when the fog lifts, you won't be confused. You'll be ready because what becomes visible next is exactly what you've been preparing for. If what we're exploring here is resonating with you, if you're recognizing yourself in this moment, I'd genuinely appreciate it if you'd subscribe to the channel. We're creating content for people who are navigating these exact shifts, who need confirmation they're not imagining what they're sensing. Your subscription helps us reach others moving through this same transformation. Please take a moment and subscribe. Now let's talk about what's actually returning to you. The dreams you had as a child weren't just dreams. Tomorrow marks the beginning of a strange kind of remembering, and it won't come through logic or analysis. It comes through the doorway you shut the moment you decided to grow up. Childhood dreams, visions, stories you told yourself at night, the worlds you created in your mind, all of that begins to resurface in a way that feels too real to ignore. There were moments in your childhood where you imagined a life so wild, so impossible that you eventually dismissed it as fantasy. But what if those weren't predictions of who you wanted to be, but fragments of who you already were? What if those dreams were pieces of your spiritual blueprint trying to reach you before the world taught you fear, doubt, and limitation? Tomorrow that doorway opens again. Not all at once, not in a dramatic flash, but slowly, subtly, like a memory that has been waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. You thought you imagined it. You thought it was fantasy. But tomorrow you'll start to remember that some of your wildest childhood dreams were actually memories from the future trying to reach you. Think back to the child who believed anything was possible. The child who saw meaning in everything. The child who felt protected by something invisible. That wasn't fantasy. That was alignment before the world pulled you out of yourself. Tomorrow reconnects you to that state. It's the moment the universe hands you back the map you were born with, the one you misplaced when life got loud and complicated. There comes a moment in every spiritual journey where the switch flips. Not in some dramatic, earth-shaking moment, but quietly, almost effortlessly, like your soul finally exhales after being tight for years. Tomorrow has the potential to be that moment. One moment of clarity can dismantle years of spiritual struggle. You've been doing the work, choosing alignment in silence, choosing growth when no one clapped for you, choosing truth even when it was uncomfortable. People think awakening is this dramatic cinematic event. In reality, it's the moment the inner light becomes brighter than the outer noise. It's when the narratives you once believed stop controlling you. It's when you finally understand that most of your battles were never between you and the world. They were between you and the illusions you inherited. Something you've been wrestling with might suddenly stop feeling heavy. A confusion that lingered for months might resolve itself without effort. A fear that felt impossible to overcome might lose its grip. This is what happens when illusions collapse. They stop needing your energy to survive. Awareness is the key to freedom. Not power, not perfection. Awareness. When you see clearly, you move differently. You choose differently. You attract differently. Tomorrow invites you into that shift. Not by giving you answers, but by removing the lies that block the answers from reaching you. Awakening isn't the end of struggle, but it is the end of confusion. It's the moment the battle changes shape. The moment you stop fighting shadows and start building your actual life. For months you've been walking through a period that felt like things were slowing down, stalling out, or losing direction. But this wasn't actually about delay. It was about watching what you would do when the environment offered you nothing to hold on to. No signs, no reassurance, no shortcuts. Silence is the universe's favorite testing ground. While you thought you were just surviving a difficult season, you were actually being observed through the lens of trust, patience, and inner sight. Would you keep going without proof? Would you stay aligned without applause? Would you listen to your inner voice even when the outer world made you question everything? Most people didn't. But you kept walking. Sometimes slowly, sometimes skeptically, but you didn't break your connection to the unseen. And now the gates open for those who didn't give up on what they couldn't see. This is why tomorrow feels like relief. Because the pressure was never life punishing you. It was life observing you. You've crossed a threshold where your trust has been proven, your commitment has been anchored, and your inner clarity has become stronger than whatever illusions tried to sway you. One of the biggest misunderstandings in spirituality is the idea that battles end when the enemy weakens. Most spiritual warfare doesn't stop because darkness retreats. It stops because you become someone darkness can no longer manipulate. You've grown into a level of awareness and strength that old patterns, old temptations, and old fears simply cannot influence the same way. That shift didn't happen instantly. It built slowly through every moment you chose honesty over illusion, alignment over convenience, and intuition over noise. A lot of what felt like warfare wasn't an attack on your life. It was resistance to your evolution. Darkness doesn't fight you because you're weak. It fights you because you're changing. Breakthroughs never come from defeating something outside of you. They come from breaking the internal agreements that allowed interference in the first place. There were lies you believed without noticing. Lies about your worth, your capabilities, your destiny, your timing. And slowly you stopped believing them. You replaced fear with clarity, hesitation with instinct, doubt with awareness. Before we close, I want to ask something. If this message has struck something deep in you, if you're feeling the truth of these shifts in your body, please subscribe to the channel. We're going deeper into navigating these spiritual transformations in upcoming content, and staying connected means you'll have support as you move through what comes next. Please take a moment and subscribe. The battle ends because the version of you that the enemy targeted doesn't exist anymore. Tomorrow marks the moment where self-awareness overrides fear, where truth dissolves confusion, and where spiritual maturity becomes your default state. The breakthrough wasn't delivered to you. You became it. For a long time now, you've been living with an invisible obstruction, something you could never fully describe, but felt every time you tried to move forward. It showed up as situations that almost worked out, opportunities that almost landed, progress that almost solidified. You kept getting close, but something slipped, stalled, or collapsed at the very last moment. What you were dealing with wasn't personal failure. It was a spiritual constraint meant to teach you something you didn't realize you were learning. This block wasn't punishment. It was a boundary placed on your path until you grew into the version of yourself who could sustain what you were asking for. Tomorrow, that invisible block dissolves. Not because of cosmic timing, but because you've simply outgrown the frequency that required that restraint. Limits fall away the moment you no longer need them. You matured in ways you didn't give yourself credit for. You became more discerning, more grounded, more aligned with your truth. You broke old emotional agreements. You stopped settling. You stopped chasing. You stopped abandoning yourself. You might notice that after tomorrow, the resistance you used to feel around certain goals simply isn't there anymore. The friction you once interpreted as failure will feel like it evaporated overnight. But in truth, it wasn't overnight. You earned this shift through every difficult choice, every moment of restraint, every time you held on to your integrity when it would have been easier to fall back into old patterns. Here's the part most people never realize until long after the shift has already happened. You're not in the same timeline as the people who hurt you anymore. The ones who doubted you, dismissed you, manipulated you, or tried to keep you small. They may still exist physically in your world, but energetically your lives no longer intersect. At some point in your journey, your growth accelerated beyond the timeline where their influence mattered. Over the past months, your choices quietly created a divergence. You stopped responding the way you used to respond. You stopped needing what you used to need. You stopped trying to convince people who were never meant to understand you. Without realizing it, you stepped out of the emotional dimension where those people held power over you. Their timeline is built on old wounds, old narratives, old illusions. Yours is built on awakening, clarity, and self-respect. The overlap was temporary, and tomorrow marks the formal end of that intersection. Some people can't follow you into the future you're meant to live. Tomorrow doesn't just mark the end of illusions. It restores something you didn't even realize you had been grieving. There is a part of you, a piece of your spirit, a gift or inner knowing that life pushed so far down that you convinced yourself it was gone forever. You adapted. You grew around its absence. You learned how to function without it, because that's what survival demanded. For some, this was a sense of wonder. For others, it was self-belief, imagination, fearlessness, emotional openness, or spiritual authority. It might have been a talent you abandoned because someone convinced you it wasn't practical. It might have been a dream that felt too risky to chase. Tomorrow doesn't just end illusions. It restores what was taken from you. This restoration is not about gaining something new. It's about receiving back something that always belonged to you, but was withheld until you were ready to integrate it. You may find yourself remembering who you were before life became heavy. Not in a nostalgic way, but in a way that feels like stepping back into the truth of who you were always becoming. One of the most powerful but least talked about effects is the sudden quiet ending of things that no longer have a spiritual purpose in your life. Some of you will wake up tomorrow and notice that something you've been carrying, something you've been forcing, or something that has been draining you simply stops having momentum. It won't break violently or fall apart dramatically. It will just stop. A thought pattern, a craving, a draining relationship, a situation you kept trying to fix, a habit you couldn't shake, a cycle that has run out of ways to repeat itself. This isn't abandonment. It's alignment. Divine closures don't need theatrics. They slip out of your life the same way illusions do. Quietly, effortlessly, without argument. You may notice that a source of stress you've been battling for months suddenly loses importance. You may look at something you thought you wanted and feel nothing. You may realize that the emotional tug someone had on you isn't there anymore. Tomorrow marks the moment where your spirit and your path stop negotiating with anything that doesn't match your new frequency. And what opens after that is reserved for the version of you who finally stopped compromising with what was never meant to stay.